Let's go, my Levia players. This is Mansant coming back at you, and I really just want to say a quick congratulations to our Levia player that made top 4 in Switzerland, our Levia player that made top 8 in Portugal, and to the 3 of us that made day 2 at the U.S. Nationals in Orlando. It was a great weekend, I think, across the board for Levia. We had a lot of strong showings across the globe, and I'd like to think that these videos have helped in some capacity. So, I'm happy to keep making them. Today's video is going to be a bit different because I actually had a game featured on stream at the US Nationals event. So we're going to be going over that so I can finally talk through some play lines in front of y'all and really dive into what it's like to be behind the seat of a deck that is so stressful to play. So, that said, before we jump into that, I want to show off the deck that I played with all the tweaks and things like that. So let's jump over. Hopefully this isn't too complicated to see here, but pretty much on the left we've got the main board of the deck that I'm going to try to take in a lot of matchups with some things that sub out. So the main difference here in this version versus what I was used to playing before is that I really was thinking hard about the Briar matchup and how aggressively leaning it seemed the metagame was going to be going into US Nationals. And one of the great parts about Levia is that she has really, really strong ability to combat those aggressive decks because she has great 2-card hands that over% damage compared to what other aggressive decks can present on a 2-card hand. So that allows you to block with 2 cards, potentially 3 to 4 if you're running the defense reactions, and still present damage numbers close to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And really the way you do that is ideally with having a blue card and then something like an Endless Maw. Right there is 9 damage off 2 cards, or something like a blue card, a Dread Screamer into a Ghostly Visit from Banished. That right there is 10 damage. So really I wanted to lean into those aggressive 2-card hands, and so one of the main changes I made from previous lists to this one was that I dropped 2 yellow Graveling Growls instead for 2 yellow Dread Screamers. So this helped the aggressive tendencies that I wanted this version of the deck to have. It enabled more of those 2-card hands, especially if I could find the Ghostly Visit early. And it also shored up the issue that Graveling Growl is amazing, but it is kind of a greedy card in terms of it's not playable all by itself. It is a card that's enabled by other cards, and that's kind of what I wanted to stray more away from and just have cards that were always playable, always quite strong. That's not to say Graveling Growl isn't a great card. It definitely is. So at the 4 count, you're still very likely to play it off of a Dread Screamer when you have a larger hand, or off of an Art of War, which of course is fantastic. The other big change in my deck list here was that I'm running the Red Writhing Beast Hulks. So Red Writhing Beast Hulk I found to be not a great aggressive card, but it does fit the bill still of a 6-power, 3-block card. And then it really does wonders in those longer, more control games when they come up because of your Howl from Beyond recursion engine. The more cards that you have that banish 3 from graveyard, the better for your ability to set up a graveyard that will never miss. With your Howl from Beyond loop, and the Writhing Beast Hulk with the keyword Dominate is actually fantastic for closing out those endgames when your opponent is really on the back foot and hoping that somehow you really just miss Blood Debt to lose the game. So Writhing Beast Hulk helped a lot in those matchups I found, so it definitely got a slot back in the deck. Other than that, I don't think there were any big changes in the main board from how I've been playing the deck for a while now and how I hopefully have shown you guys how to play the deck. But what the big changes were in the sideboard, because I wanted to make sure the sideboard was completely tuned up to shore up every weakness that I had across my matchups, and making sure that I gave respect to even some fringe matchups that I knew were just very hard. So what you can see in the sideboard here is cards that do exactly that. So Arg Smash, for example, is going to come in specifically versus Dash and Kano. It's going to do that because it is a Silver Bullet card in the case of Dash. Destroying items is just fantastic. But then it also has dual use in the Kano matchup because it lets you take out more reds for just some more pitch. So I liked thinking of the sideboard as cards that have a dual purpose. If it's only coming in for one matchup, I probably want to change it to something else that can show up multiple matchups. So even a card like Arc Smash that you'd think would only come in for one matchup, Nope, I actually do play it in a couple. Deep-Rooted Evil, amazing card in those very long grindy games like versus Oldhim, Dash, Bravo, Prism. You want to throw in a Deep-Rooted Evil because even though it's not searchable straight out of your deck, once it is in grave, the recursion you can get off playing this card is a lot of value. It can even set up bigger Blood Rush turns than you've ever believed because all of a sudden a blue card can always turn in to 6 damage out of Banish, which is +2 from Blood Rush, so 8. It's pretty incredible. So that's going in for a couple matchups there too. We've got Energy Potion, which I found to be an amazing card versus Bravo, and of course another blue pitch versus Kano. So one of the tricky things with playing against Bravo is that they can get to the point where they will kind of just not only cripple you with an actual crippling crush with a pummel, but they will also make you take blood debt most likely when they pull off an attack like that because you're going to miss blood debt. So the beauty of running Energy Potion is that you can set up amazing mid-game states where you have an Energy Potion in play and then anything that turns off blood debt in your arsenal. And if you know that you have those 2 cards in play, you will never lose the Bravo matchup. Because even when they tank a huge turn of damage to try to swing into you, cripple your hand, make you take blood debt, all of a sudden off of even 0 cards in hand, you can crack Energy Potion to play your arsenal card that will turn off blood debt. So that's a super strong play there, and especially since they tend to go on the back foot early, you do have more time to set up Energy Potion. You can also throw it in versus stuff like Ice Lexi for more blues. You can throw it in versus Kano, of course, for more blues. And just a very good card that I found in testing overall. Also helps your Blood Rush turns. Guardian of the Shadow Realm came in versus, I believe, Ice Lexi and Dorinthia in particular. Dorinthia I never really saw, wasn't expecting to see, but once again I wanted to have cards that had dual use across matchups, and this is one that fit exactly that. Versus Ice Lexi, the fact that it's a defense reaction that you're paying for anyway, means you can break Frostbite on their turn so that you don't have to worry about it going into your active turn, and it costing 2 is perfect for that, right? You just pitch a blue, you can still play Guardian of the Shadow Realm, and then potentially even recur it from Banish, but I wouldn't probably go for that play versus Ice Lexi. Versus Dorinthia, it's better in that regard, where this is just an extra defense reaction that can put you 3 over her attacks. Also one that can come from Arsenal as well, and really just shut her down. This in conjunction with Husk is just fantastic. Along with, skip over a bit here, the fact that I run Unmovable as well. The Unmovable 1 copy is also for Dorinthia, also for Bravo, because it also works into that plan of setting up either the Unmovable in Arsenal for when they try to go for the crippling play, or what I talked about before with Energy Potion and the card in Arsenal. So I know this might seem a little scattered. I have a sheet I can show y'all in a second, but just to jump through the other 3 cards here is the Sink Belows. Sink Belows I'm putting in versus matchups that have a lot of on-hit triggers, things that you really need to cover those damage thresholds for. So we're looking at like Lightning Briar, we're looking at like Lightning Lexi, we're looking at Katsu to put Sink Belows in for that kind of hit effect matchup. As far as the equipment goes, of course, I'm trying to always run Carrying Husks, Scabskins, Hope Merchants, Gamblers, and Mandible Claws, but you do have to resort to Arcanite Skullcap sometimes, once again, in those hit effect matchups, because you need to protect yourself from those thresholds. Tunic goes into a lot of the longer control games, just because the extra resource generation means that you almost never whiff your Blood Rush turns. It lets you play even more Howl from Beyonds. It lets you play those Deep-Rooted Evils. It's just fantastic. And then I did have to respect Kano, because Kano is quite hard for this deck since you don't get to fill the graveyard. So I did throw in the Skullhorn and the Null Rune Gloves. So looking into how this looks on a specific sideboard guide, it looks like this. So if you want to take a screenshot here to at least copy how this build was doing it, these were the notes that I had going into the event. Everything felt pretty good. Actually, let me fix this live right here. You also take out 2 Graveling for +2 Arg Smash. There we go. These sideboard notes were curated over a lot of gameplay. I played at least every one of these matchups until I could win a best of 5 series versus it. And this is what I found to be what worked the best versus everything. So hopefully that, these results can be mimicked by y'all. But What does happen in the real world, especially in a longer tournament, is that variants can start to come up just because you are playing a deck that even if you have the best plan for, even if you've got notes like these, you've got the tons of games behind under your belt, sometimes Levia will just lose games out of nowhere. And that's what I have coming up for you real quick, a very special treat. We're going to jump over to the stream game that I had versus Daniel Johnson on Prism, where, boy oh boy, you would look at this matchup and think, man, this is unlosable. This is a great matchup for Levia. Nothing can go wrong. But of course, things can go very wrong over, unfortunately, no control of your own. And that was kind of what ended up going on over the weekend. In the Classic Constructed rounds, I ended up 6-4, losing two pretty high variance games to Akano and then this match on stream, and then also losing twice to Lightning Briar, which I knew was a very close matchup, and unfortunately just couldn't pull it through. I'm not quite sure how to always make that winnable. Might just not be possible. And you'd think if it was, everyone would be playing Levia, right? So that just may always be a losing matchup. But the other matchups I played against another Prism. It was actually Jack McCaffley, who I played the round right before this. He's the guy who won the Dallas ProQuest. I got a great game in versus him, which I won. I beat a Dash. I beat a Ice Lexi. I beat a two Earth Briars as well, a Agrovisceri, and something else that I don't quite remember at the moment, but it may come back to me. In side events, I also did pretty well, ended up going 6-0 across two other side events, so that puts me at 12-4 on the weekend with Levia. So I think I personally still had a great showing with her, even though I didn't make the cut or anything like that. I had a lot of fun, met a lot of cool people, and had a lot of people just amazed that the deck could do so well when it decides to work. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into this game here, and we'll get some thoughts, some live commentary as to how this game played out. So, like I said, going into this game, I had just played Jack McCaffley the round before this, so I knew the matchup. I knew that I could win it. You don't generally have a game plan going into Prism other than being patient and letting them be the proactive ones with their auras. And once they start doing that, that's going to let you know at some point when to start going more aggressive, when you can count down their auras and know that, all right, this is the point where I've seen like double Merciful gone, double Genesis gone, so that if at some point they take damage to leave an aura in play, it's not going to get to that point where you just get overblown by the amount of auras they have in play. So you do have to play patient. So we can see on turn one here, I gave his deck a cut. I had lost the die roll, he decides to go first, and I, of course, give him the perfect hand of Library turn one. It was unfortunate to say the least, but I have a good number of yellows in my deck. So the plan here, you can see I pitched a red and a blue to just swing Mandible Claws immediately. And I know this looks bad. Normally you should always pass priority to a Prism player so that if they play an aura at instant speed, you gain priority back and you can break it. But in my hand I had one yellow, and I knew I had to clear this library as soon as possible, so I made the gamble of, you know what, even if he has an aura in play, I need to just let it sit for a turn, because I need to dig 2 cards deeper into finding that yellow pitch card. So what I do there is pitch the red, blue, Arsenal, the other red that was in my hand, I believe, to hold the yellow in hand and hopefully draw into another one because my ratios of yellows are pretty good. And that's actually exactly what happens here. I did draw a second yellow, so that plan worked perfectly. I know he's only going to get maybe one turn of library value, so I'm not too worried about that because you're playing a slow game. So one turn of them having a 5-card hand is really not a big deal. So sure enough, this right here is kind of why Prism has such a tough matchup in Levia, is because they have a hard time chipping damage through to you unless you allow them to. They're going to play stuff like Heralds that you're going to pop. They're going to play stuff like Auras that you're going to pop. And that really means they don't get to amass a ton of shields other than through Prismatic Shield. So that's really what makes this matchup so good for you, is that you're really not taking damage unless you allow it, right? You're going to just commit cards to popping the Phantasm. They're not gaining cards in Soul very easily, and that just means that their plink damage just doesn't really happen like it does in other matchups. So you see here, sure enough, I have the 2 yellows that I discard. I believe is a yellow Hungering Slaughter Beast and a Beast Within. So the Beast Within does trigger. I take a damage, and a red Dread Screamer goes to hand. I don't love that it was a Beast Within that I had to discard, because it's just wasted damage, and of course there's the possibility that I banish something like a Blood Rush right there, and that just would have sucked. But, you know, it's something that has to happen just to clear library. So with that, I'm just passing priority to him, because now we're in that game state of I'm just not going to do anything until I count down his auras in play, or I have an amazing Blood Rush turn, something like that. So that's exactly what happens. Even though I drew a card off Beast Within, you'd think this is a great turn to pressure. No, I would rather wait, because if I commit to an attack and then they play an aura, my turn is going to be very hard pressed if I don't have a Gogan source into popping that aura, and it just can turn into them having multiple auras on the field. So with that, just little patience here, waiting for the Prism player to do his thing. I will say that when I played Jack in the last round, you know, we were talking through it because I knew he was playing Blinding Beams, so I was a little scared of just getting blown out by some weird Herald attacks that he would Blinding Beam and I would just not be able to pop. But that game went exactly as I could have hoped. I believe I won that game maybe like 26-0, something like that. And once again, it's just patient play that gets you there. I didn't have the Blinding Beam play come up and bite me at some point, but he did have a couple Phantasmaclasms that were troublesome. It looks like this Prism player, I don't believe I ever saw Phantasmaclasm. He was more on the Aura strategy, which, I mean, both are valid into Levi. I think the Aura strategy has more of a chance to ever win the game. The Herald version doesn't really, as long as the Levi player can play off 2-card hands pretty well, because you might have to block with 2 cards to pop Phantasms. So here he plays the Merciful Retribution, and just plays something else that I just pop. So he's doing that on purpose because with the Merciful up, it does go to Soul, so that's how he's trying to get value a little bit. Even though he knows he's not going to push damage, it at least gets him something in Soul, which is going to be a shield later, which is going to be a life later. But me seeing the Merciful on the field, this is what I want. You notice I have no blood debt ticking up yet. I want to see him commit these resources so that I can clear his auras and then start to play the game I want to play. So thinking through my options here, I guess, I still had the Dread Screamer in hand from earlier, so I'm pretty sure at this point I'm thinking about, is this a turn where I can Dread Screamer his face and then the Merciful Retribution, or do I wait another turn still and pop the Merciful? And there we go. So it's a Merciful pop. I also pitched a Blood Rush here, because it's a bit too early to commit to a Blood Rush if there's an aura in play at all. I'd rather play a Blood Rush when there's no auras in play, so that he either has the choice of taking basically all the damage, or all the damage to play an aura, rather than me playing a Blood Rush into when he already has an aura in field, so that my turn is significantly less damage to pop his aura. It's a lot easier for him to block. So on the end of mine, he played a Parable of Humility, which, once again, this is just exactly what I want, right? Because I have no blood debt. So even though he's committing these auras, I'm going to just pop them, and slowly start to win the game from there. So these considerations are whether or not I should block even these 1 pips of damage, which can be relevant. So that's the consideration here, right? Because all I really have to do is pay 2 to pop an aura. So, yep, just blocking, taking 1. I believe I'm also not blocking with the Dread Screamer intentionally, because that is one of the best cards to then swing the game back when they don't have an aura. So I am holding that one, which is leaking a little bit of damage, because my arsenal is something else from turn 1. Yep, so same thing here. See, easy enough. I keep the 1 card in hand, which is the Dread Screamer, to just pay to break an aura with weapon. And this is what Prism wants to do, right? Playing another aura at the end of my turn. This is one that can get out of control. These are the ones that you really don't want to see mid-game when you've committed to attacking them rather than attacking their auras. So you know, at this point I've counted down a Parable, a Merciful, and now a Genesis. I've seen him pitch one Arclight Sentinel and perhaps an Ode to Wrath. I don't quite remember. So I'm feeling like the pivot turn is coming up pretty soon. I've got my Tunic built up. But this is when the chip damage can start to become a little cumbersome. Because the Genesis sat in play for a turn, plus the free soul he got off the Merciful means the shields are actually in play. And here we go, just popping the Genesis with the yellow dread. Nice. So unfortunately, this part of the game is not that interesting. You know, we have to get to the later turns when I'm actually doing something. But it just shows kind of how patient you need to be with Levia. Even though she is this brute, it doesn't mean you go crazy aggressive in every matchup. You're just waiting, especially versus the Prism here. It's very much a resource game. Whew. But what did I say about Prismatic Shields and Genesis and Merciful? That's how they build up the shields. And so now it's taken long enough for me to go on the aggressive that he does have this amount of shields in play. So this is kind of the big signifier. All right, patience be damned. I do need to start breaking these things. So I believe that's what happens next turn. Now, as of now, neither of us have gotten like insanely lucky or anything like that, like, other than the library turn 1. This is pretty much like what Prism games look like. Especially fortunate for me that I was able to pop the library so early because the game's back to being relatively even. So yep, see that red Dread Screamer I've been holding since turn 1? This is the push. I've been taking a little bit of chip damage here and there instead of blocking 1 because I wanted to hold that Dread Screamer for this kind of turn. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. It becomes very hard for Prism to block all the shields, sorry, with no soul, it's very hard for Prism to actually swing with that many shields if they want to protect them at the same time, right? Because they're going to have to block the full 6 to not lose any shields. I'm going to swing with something else. They're going to have to block again, hopefully with 2 cards, but then that leaves them with no way to activate a yellow pitch in their grave to swing with the shields. So these kind of push turns are really, really strong. Of course, now it's getting a little unfortunate. He had the soul shield to perfectly cover up the 6, and it's going to fill soul. But I've got another Dread Screamer in hand. This is kind of the beauty of running the additional Dread Screamers as well, right? Is that it's additional graveyard clear on demand, and more go again, potentially all in sequence in the same turn. So with the double Dread Screamer here, this is basically the best I could ask for in terms of trying to put on pressure and popping his shields. You can also see the Alt Art Hope Merchant's Hood that I've got looking pretty cool. Yep. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. It becomes very hard for the Prism player to protect shields and still have a play. So now Daniel's committed. I would rather have these cards in hand to make a play. It must be something pretty good. So that means I'm going to keep going, try to pop shields. I roll Scabskins here because I have the Ghostly Visit and Banish, plus the Tunic resource, plus a card in Arsenal, plus a resource floating. I don't quite remember what the card in Arsenal is, but it must have been playable off of 1 resource, because that would have meant, it might be a Boneyard Marauder, because that would have meant I could, off 2 resources, play the Ghostly and the Boneyard, make sure that now I've pushed a lot of damage and broken all the shields, and actually get good use of the Tunic. All right. So those cards he was holding in hand were to play once again another Aura. This one is going to cover up those last 2 shields, but like I said, he's now got no cards in hand, so this is not a 3 damage turn by him. This is a 1 damage turn, which I'm a lot happier about. He's also got no cards in Arsenal, so at this point, I've got a Tunic counter up, I've got a card in Arsenal, I've got the graveyard exactly how I want it, with a Ghostly Visit, a 6 power, and then something else. So I know I'm always hitting next turn, I know I'm always resetting that Ghostly Visit. So I felt like I was in a really, really good spot at this point in the game, right? Because all things equal, he's not really setting up anymore. He's playing off just 4-card hands. I'm going to be putting on a ton of pressure. But then we start to see how variance comes into play. I don't know if this is the exact turn, but let's see it. All right. So even though I'd like to just clear auras here, I have committed to putting some Blood Debt in the Banish Zone already. So even though this is not a super powerful go again, it's just a Blue Dread Screamer. It does satisfy the Blood Debt. It does still give me go again to go ahead and pop an aura and still put pressure on his hand and his shields. There we go. So relatively weak turn, but this is going to put me pretty ahead because I'm clearing his aura, clearing out his hand. But of course, he draws another aura here, which is not the worst, but it means that I have to kind of slow down my game plan again. Even though his turn is just going to be swing for 1, I once again need to be able to play into his life points, into his shields, and clear the aura. I wonder what that card in Arsenal is. I don't remember. I feel like it might just be a Hungering Slaughter Beast or something. I can't quite see. It's also, okay, blocking with the, hey, that's the one of Yellow Graveling Growl. Funny story, that's the only non-foil in my deck. I couldn't find a foil copy from anyone, not even any of the vendors. So that was the only non-foil in the deck. All right, so this is what I was talking about a second ago. So he's playing with no setup, right? He's playing with just whatever he draws off the top. And I'm trying to set up my big turns. And I've got that set up. I've got cards in Arsenal, I've got the Ghostly Visit I've set up, I've got my Tunic ticking up. Unfortunately, when I finally decide this is the perfect turn for Blood Rush, he draws into the Arclight. So that just didn't line up at all. It wasn't in his arsenal, he just drew it off the top. And it's also at like the worst timing for me, because this is my Blood Rush turn. It's also a turn where he has double aura in play and rolling scab skins. I did not hit double action points. So this is like worst case scenario by far. This just happens against Prism. This isn't like a Levia problem. But these are the tricky turns where all of a sudden, oh boy, you just feel like you might lose the game. At this point, looking at the life totals, I believe I decided to take Blood Debt here rather than commit one of my cards in hand. And this could have been a big mistake. I don't remember if I could turn off Blood Debt here or not. I feel like I probably could have. But instead, I decided, once again, I'm just going to have a slow turn. So let's not blow all my resources into this turn that's already been botched. So I do take some Blood Debt here. And that could have been, like, honestly, a big misplay. Because, as we'll see later, that life that I take later really, really hurt the game. So now this is scary, right? Because now he's got a turn to jump back into the game. It was just kind of drawn that way, oh well. But he does pitch a yellow, right, to create another shield, and swings for 4. And this is what gets scary, because you don't want him to have many turns like that. It's normally pretty hard for Prism to have turns like that into a Levia, but I've just lost my huge tempo play. So now it's becoming difficult. How do I get back into the game? One of the ways to get back into the game is rolling scab skins versus Prism, because you don't, unlike using Go again into a Spectra, when you use an action point, you still have your second action point. So I do get fortunate there with a scab skins roll to get 2 action points, but at this point that's just average. I believe I've rolled it twice now. Once it was a miss, once was 2 action points. So I'm fine with that. And then this is, once again, kind of how you push through Prism and clear the shields. This is this is perfect for me at this point. I got the double action points, so I was able to pop Aura into a very tall, aggressive attack. So with the Endless Maw here, that allows me to push 9 damage, which is either almost his whole hand to cover up, or he leaks shields and has a weak play. But Prism is Prism, right? So once again with 0 setup, seriously, 0 setup, no cards in arsenal, he draws into a tome with a Merciful in play, so he of course gets the soul trigger without having to use Halo of Illumination. Then he draws into a second tome, no setup by the way, this is not pitch stacking, this is just off the top. And this was supposed to be a good turn for me, right? Reading the board state, thought it was a good turn, but Prism just has ways to completely flip these games. So I'm still not feeling terrible. I mean, he's definitely got a massive hand. I think he has like 5 cards in hand. But I've done what I wanted, which is clear an aura and present a tall attack. I know it's not going to gain me the advantage I wanted anymore, but it's still, you know, from reading the board state at the start of this turn, what I wanted to do. So, looking okay here. I'm able to clear out the shields, deal some damage, but then he's going to play at the end step here. Yep, so this is end step. Plays an Arclight. Yep. Plays an Arclight, which honestly, like, that one is not one of the scarier ones for where I am at this point in the game. A Genesis would be a lot scarier for me, because Arclight just kind of gives me information as I look at his turn. I just know that my next turn has to be pop Arclight, do something else. Obviously, if I roll Scab Skins, I can very easily get around the Arclight Sentinel, so it may just not get him as much value as he's hoping. Him popping Dreamweavers on an Erudition is totally fine by me. This is why you run Scab Skins. I mean, you run Scab Skins for a lot of reasons, but you run Scab Skins and don't block with it until you see the Dreamweaver Erudition, because they're coming in for 5 Dominate, and you'll have a 2 block with your Scabs, and then 3 block in hand. So, I know I can't pop it, but I believe he's only got like 1 card left in hand, so I'm not expecting another Herald after this anyway. It's just going to be like the Arclight Sentinel ping, or maybe like another shield, something like that. So, definitely blocking here. The consideration was, do I block with a non-6 or a 6? I believe the 6 I had in hand, I was really hoping to be able to play off of a potential 2 roll with Scabskins to be able to claw into that 6, or maybe it was my only way to turn off Blood Debt. But I did block with the non-6 there. Those are hard choices, but, you know, they're hand dependent. Okay, so cool. Rewarded here with, you know, full knowledge of the board state, that the Arclight Sentinel into an attack at him is all I really need to do this turn. Scabskins is a bro, helps me out here. So now the consideration is, obviously it has to be Sentinel first, so it's probably going to be a weapon swing. Yep. You can see that Prism also makes it difficult for you to use cards like Art of War, though, right? Like, Prism just has a way to mess up with all your turns that you want to have, like your Art of Wars and Blood Rushes. You do have to play more on their game plan. So, pitching an Art of War here, I believe I have 2 cards in hand. The card in Arsenal, I really want to see myself play this card in Arsenal, because I don't remember what it is. Pretty sure it's been there since turn 1. Alright. Summoning Blasmaphet. Yeah, this is pretty cool. I believe what I was thinking about here was that I really want a way to guarantee to turn off Blood Debt, and I had an attack in hand that could do it, but my only card to banish was going to be, or the card to play was an Endless Maw. Okay, I remember this. My cards in hand were Doomsday and an Endless Maw, so the consideration becomes pitch Doomsday to play the Endless Maw, or play Doomsday, swing Blasmaphet, banish the Endless Maw. And while Blasmaphet is actually a little tricky to play in this matchup because it can turn on their cards like Herald of Erudition. I had just seen one played, but that is why I paused a little bit longer, because you don't always just want to play with Plasma Fet, especially when they're at this high on life, where they can definitely just tank the hit to swing into it. So that's what that consideration was. My god, my cat's going crazy in the background. Alright. So yep, resolved his effect there. Banished the Endless Maw, which hurts a little bit because that card is so powerful. 3 cost for 9. But I at least get to clear a bit of his soul. So now he's, I believe, swinging. Yeah, he's swinging into me on this one. So super telegraphed that he has another attack that's going into Plasma Fet. But at this point where the life threshold is, I can't really get greedy taking hits anymore, because that part of the game, that mid-game part of the game, where I'm at risk of taking the shield damage is kind of over. So now my life points really need to be saved just in case of unfortunate blood debt damage. Hopefully not too much blood debt, and hopefully not blood debt at all. But life does become a resource around like that 20 to 15 mark, because you don't want to kill yourself to blood debt. You need to be okay taking a little bit if it just so happens. So while I would love to just tank that Herald hit and have a good turn, my life, where it is, I just can't afford to do that. So we're going to pop it. He's definitely going to go and clear the Plasma Fet. Command and Conquer on the Plasma Fet. Yep. So poor Blasmo only survived 1 turn, but he basically bought me 6 life, right? That's a Command and Conquer that didn't get launched into me, so pretty okay with that. I do remember... Oh, yes. Okay, I remember this turn. This was a turn where I thought long and hard about whether or not to use Hope Merchant's Hood, because my hand was, I believe, 2 red Howl from Beyonds. Yep, 2 red Howl from Beyonds. And then a yellow Hungering Slaughter Beast and a red Hungering Slaughter Beast. And thought about whether or not that was awkward enough to make me use Hope Merchants. But it did still turn off Blood Debt. Plus, looking at my graveyard in that state, I had exactly 3 misses in my graveyard. So using Hope Merchants there would have made the odds 4 misses in the graveyard, which I thought, no, that's getting a little greedy, so let's just play Hungering Slaughter Beast. Of course, though, out of 10 cards in grave and only 3 misses, I hit the sub 5% chance to whiff all 3 and don't turn off Blood Debt this turn. And what did I just say about this is like the critical phase where you do need to keep your life as a resource for Blood Debt? Well, of course, you know, you don't ever want to take it. I will be taking it this end phase, so I am glad that I didn't tank that Herald to the face last turn. But at the same time, basically the worst case scenario is still happening, where he's getting a ton of shields and punishing the fact that I just got unlucky, and will be taking Blood Debt here, because now these individual pings for 1 really, really hurt. I no longer have that life cushion through no fault of my own, just strictly some bad luck. And if we think about the luck this entire match, with the turn 1 library, with the tome into tome, with the Arclight Sentinel on my Blood Rush turn with 0 setup, it was getting a little frustrating to see that I was trying so hard to play this game perfectly, and he was getting rewarded with just what he was ripping off the top. So, you know, that's just how Levia can feel sometimes. But I felt like I was still in it. I knew this was going to be a horrible turn, taking all these pings. Even though the life lead is now so much in his favor, there's a chance that if I can just have, you know, a Blood Rush turn off the back of this, if I just don't die here and push through all his shields, he's only got, I believe, 1 more card in Soul. So I'm not really at risk of ever taking a ton of pings to the shields anymore if I can just clear them out with a really big turn. So I'm using Hope Merchants because I need that information about my next turn of, will this be a turn that I can potentially pivot and turn the game? So I Hope Merchants for, I believe, 2 cards because I think I had a big power card, either like a Blood Rush or an Art of War, something like that. So I wanted to know if my next turn could work the way I wanted to, or if I would have to be super, super defensive because I wasn't looking at a hand that could clear auras. So looks like I was looking at a hand that could clear auras because now I'm committing to try to take the least amount of damage possible because I know that my turn is going to be big enough to break auras here. So blocking with 1 card in hand, 2 pieces of equipment, I only took 2 damage. Yes, the life lead is looking miserable, but I'm not expecting that he's running Glisten in his deck either because he's not looking like one of the slower tank prisms. So, yep, this is the kind of turn I'm looking at, right? I have a red Dread Screamer, which is going to allow me to push quite a bit, hopefully through his hand, and hit that state of, once again, either he has 1 card left in hand to try to turn on the Go Again on his shields for next turn, or he just tanks it all and loses all his shields. So, swinging with the red Dread Screamer, now we are going to hit, thank goodness. I mean, it just would have been game right there if I didn't. And we're putting pressure on him. Yep, so he's going to commit cards to protecting his shields. So now I'm just going for the biggest amount of damage possible. Okay, so the card in Arsenal was a red Graveling Growl from turn 1. Wow, I did not remember that at all. That's the kind of card I really want to play off an Art of War, right? But I believe when I had the Art of War, it was a very awkward clear aura turn, so I couldn't do that the way I wanted. Alright, but I've got a new card in Arsenal now. I did clear a bunch of shields, and he's left with a 1-card hand, which is going to clear out his soul. So this is when I'm looking very fine with how the game is. It looks like life is very bad, right? But I can basically decide when I want to take damage versus Prism. And this is kind of that last moment where he's going to hopefully have a board state advantage over me. Because once again, I'm going in with an Arsenal advantage over him, and he's got no cards in Soul. And I believe we've seen 2 Soul Shields, 2 Merciful Retributions, and a Genesis, so the likelihood of him ramping up into Soul to get these shields going is really not that likely if I can keep on with the pressure. So leading with a Dread Screamer. I hope that's a red one, don't remember. Just to push more damage. The other unfortunate part with how ahead he got in that mid game off the Blood Debt turn was that I had to break Tunic, because I could have easily gotten another Tunic or 2 tick off this game, which would have been amazing. Also to note, people in the chat are mentioning that, oh, why don't you run Ebonfold so you don't take Blood Debt? Just so that everyone is aware, Ebonfold does not really protect you from graveyard whiffs. It protects you from, if you don't draw a way to turn off Blood Debt, then boom, Ebonfold will turn off your Blood Debt that turn, sure. But what people don't realize is that when you miss the 3 cards in graveyard on your banish, you weren't obviously planning around that. And if you're going to plan around that every turn to hold 1 resource, to hold 1 card in hand, to potentially use Ebonfold, you will just lose every game if you play that scared. So Ebonfold just does not protect you from the horrible off chance that you miss 3 cards in graveyard. So Ebonfold really just does nothing this game. Hope Merchants did more, which I believe I used it like last turn or 2 turns ago. The whole point of that turn was to be able to push through his shields, which I exactly did. So I would say Hope Merchants is doing more for this game than Ebonfold ever would. It's a big reason to just really not run Ebonfold. We see another big push turn. And this is what I'm saying with like the life where it is. I feel totally fine about winning this game. It's like very unlikely. I took way too much to Blood Debt, but Prism just doesn't really have a big opening to get through and finish me off. Yeah, so look at that. All these hits are landing. Obviously, he's got cards in hand, so he's going to make some play. But I'm in the position where I'll be able to arsenal a card. So even if I have to start blocking with 2 cards from hand, I will eventually gain the momentum back still anyway. So he played his 3rd tome. I mean, that's just expected. He'll find that at some point. And he's playing a Merciful here. This is pretty lucky because I'm seeing the 3rd Merciful without shields in play, so I'm not just getting lethaled out of nowhere, right? But it is scary that he's going to be playing the Merciful. He's going to have at least 1 more shield up because he's got 1 more card in Soul. So I'm looking at potentially 2 damage there. And if he gets any other aura like an Arclight, that's like 3 damage and I probably lose. So I'm really hoping that off his turn, right? I believe he just does he just swing for 1 pass? No, okay, so he makes a shield, right? Yeah. So he makes a shield and is going to swing here. And I'm just now knowing that my next turn has to be clearing the Merciful first. I can't ever swing into him and then the Merciful like I would want to with like a Dread Screamer because he's going to let the shield pop, of course. And if he gets another card in Soul somehow, that's just basically lethal right there. So I know my next turn has to be leading with the Merciful pop into hitting him. So unfortunately that means it has to be a Scabskin's turn. In these really tight situations, like with what came up because I took the Blood Debt, you have to rely on a card like Scabskins. I don't like relying on a card like Scabskins. I'd like to have more options, but you just make do with what you can, and this is just how the game decided to play itself out. So I do have to block these pings of 1 because they are super scary. So I've got 2 blues in hand at least, and a Dread Screamer, whatever color that is. So I know I have a Ghostly Visit in Banished, I know I have my Arsenal card, and I have my weapon. So that's potentially 3 attacks, right? There we go. Okay, so another block. Soul Harvest is just really not good right here because I can't swing into him. I have to kill the aura, right? So it is unfortunate to lose that card, but that's how tight the game is because of the Blood Debt. So reminder, I took 15 Blood Debt this game, right? If I don't take 15 Blood Debt, I would be with a life lead on him and feel just incredible about this game. If I'd only take 1 instance of those 2 Blood Debts, then, you know, I wouldn't be ahead on life, but I would feel a lot more comfortable with how these end game states are playing out. So, I play an Art of War. This is my 2nd big power card turn of the game, right? 2nd big power turn card. He has an Arclight. If you remember what happened when I tried to play my 1st big power turn card of the game, it was a Bloodrush Bellows that he had an Arclight for. So this time he has an Arclight from Art of War. It feels terrible. And looking at the board state here, it's pretty much game over. He doesn't have me on like exact lock, but basically I have to roll a 3 on Scabskins, or rather a 6 on Scabskins, or I lose the game. I'm going to pause it right here real quick to explain this. But basically, what it is that with the Arclight and the Merciful on board, right, I have to attack the Arclight first, which means I'm going to take an Arcane Damage ping from Merciful, and Arclight's going to go to Soul. That'll put me at 2 life. Then I need to attack his Merciful. The Merciful is going to ping me for an Arcane Damage and then go to Soul, which puts me at 1 life. Then he has 2 cards in Soul and a shield on the board still. If I can't get 3 attacks off this turn with like turning off, I already turned off Blood Debt with Art of War, right? So it would be like Weapon Swing, Ghostly Visit, right? To swing through, pop his shields, leave him with 2 cards in Soul, and 0 cards in hand. I can win this game. But if I can't clear this shield, he will gain huge incremental value with the fact that he has 2 more cards in Soul. so that at any point, if at the end of a turn he still has 2 cards in hand, he can just banish from soul, create a shield, start of his turn, banish from soul, create a shield, and basically Kodachi lock me out of the game. That's what I'm looking at a board state like this. So that's why I have to roll a 6 on Scab Skins or it's over. So I rolled a 2, and a 2 just never wins me the game here, right? So I have to use Gambler's Gloves and hope and pray for a 6. It's literally the only thing that gets me out. Of course, I reroll into a 1. Now the 1 happened off camera. I'd already turned off Blood Debt, so I didn't actually lose the game here, so I conceded, which is actually very against the rules. But the judge didn't say anything, so I think they just assumed I died to Blood Debt, and that was that. Also, people are saying greed in the chat, on the dice roll. I don't think the chat really knows what's going on in this game. The casters didn't really know what's going on in this game. But I just wanted to give this VO because there was a lot going on in that game, and pretty much none of it was going my way. And so just a PSA to everyone who wants to play Levia. She's a very fun hero. She's very rewarding to play perfectly. But out of nowhere, she will punish you like you wouldn't believe for just nothing you've done wrong. And that's what we saw there. And that's why, my record at Nationals with CC was 6-4. And I had a loss. I had 2 losses that were just very unlucky, like the one you saw on stream. I also had a loss versus Kano that was similarly unlucky. I just saw no blues for the first 3 turns and just got down to like 9 life. It was horrible. And then I had 2 losses to Lightning Briar. So Levia really wasn't like the best meta call, but I wanted to prove that she could still do well, that she was still a formidable deck, but she doesn't have a good matchup in a Lightning Briar, and she can also just lose like every 4th or 5th game just due to insane variance that is just overwhelmingly punishing to the player. And your opponent's going to sit there and feel so good like they outskilled you by picking 3 cards that didn't banish a 6. But we all know, we Levia players know, there's no skill in that. They just got lucky and you just got unlucky. So maybe in the future I'll just start rolling dice or something to decide what cards are banished. But anyway, that was the run. I had a lot of fun. I did get a giant Levia card. And also I want to announce that I'll be doing a giveaway pretty soon when we start to get closer to that 400 to 500 subscriber mark. So once again, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. This has been Mansant, back at you again with another Levia video. And yeah, let's just keep having fun with our girl. Peace, everybody.